All righty, we're a couple minutes early, but let's go ahead and get started. We've got a rather large, involved agenda today, and I appreciate everybody's cooperation in moving things along. I recognize that everybody's here. Full complement of the Board of Commissioners. The minutes were emailed to you, so I need a motion to approve the minutes as mailed.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Normally we would be considering new business, but like last meeting, we have several visitors here to hear about KUB's response to the tree panel recommendations. So if y'all don't object, we're going to move ahead to that part of the agenda and go into the President's report, which will be basically the tree panel. But I want to remind everybody, last month we approved a resolution thanking and acknowledging the tree panel for their recommendation and input along with their commitment to the community during the process. So we're going to hear staff's response to the panel's report today. So Mintha, all yours.
Got it. Thank you very much. Somebody grab the lights. Thanks. Thank you, Chair. I want to remind everybody that this is the second time that we've had a report to you. Last month we had the report summary of the tree panel recommendations, and the purpose of today is to share with the commissioners in the audience what the KUB staff's response has been to that report. First, I want to go back and remind you of the abundance of work that has been done. The tree panel meetings were not only long, lengthy, arduous, but I think very, very helpful. Many of the staff attended those meetings, and the recommendations speak for themselves, but it was very helpful for us to be there to just simply listen and to get the input from the people who came in and made presentations to that panel, as well as to the panel comments themselves. And I want to say that I guess the most important thing that I was reminded from the process is how important it is to listen. Many times we're very hectic and we're very engaged and we're very focused, but sometimes it's helpful to take the time it takes to step back and go through a process like this and to not only learn from it, but just to listen to the dynamic going on. And we did do that. We think it was very, very helpful, and we obviously learned a great deal from that process. The review that we undertook was to take the benefit of the panel report, the minority reports, as well as other inputs. There have been a lot of inputs over the last 8 to 10 months with regard to the tree issue, and we took all that under consideration when we were planning our response to it. I think I told you last month there were 73 recommendations from the panel. The truth is there's actually 75 because the panel actually had a recommendation in its introduction, and then it closed with another recommendation that I'll get to in a few minutes. So there were 75 formal recommendations, but to engage in dissecting that and to figure out what we could and couldn't do, we had to take each of those recommendations and go in and evaluate them in detail. And it turned out there was over 150 actionable items within all those recommendations. I want to announce here on the front end and try to take away a little bit of the suspense. It is the staff's recommendation that we recommend implementation of all but 4 of the recommendations that came from the panel. I'll get to those in a moment. The basis for our review was first operational. How can we do it as effectively as possible? How can we change our process? Will it work? Can we work with our contractors to make this work? And then second was the financial impact of the recommendations. The panel did a lot of really good hard work on the process, the issue, but they weren't charged with looking at the cost of implementation or prioritizing time frame for implementation. So we undertook that as our responsibility, and you'll see in the report today what our recommendations are there. You will see that we have a short-term and long-term implementation plan. We want to get to as many things as we can as soon as possible, but some of the things that we are going to recommend implementation will take some time to engage on and to make sure that when it's done correctly. And finally, as we announced last month, we want to continue to have the public input process. And we will again go to the public with public meetings next week. We have meetings scheduled, and you'll see a schedule of that in just a few moments. Before I move into the comments, let me again thank the panel for their hard work. I've been in public service for 33 years now, and I've never seen a group give more of themselves, of their time and their passions, and I think it's really produced a great work product. I also want to thank the board. Over this last month, since we presented the initial recommendations to you, there's not one of you who hasn't talked with me or Bill or Liz or somebody on staff and given your thoughts and ideas and inputs. And I know it took you a while to read all this and to digest it all, and I know how much you care about it, and we thank you for that input too. And finally, I want to say thanks to the operational staff. The most amazing thing to me about them, even when the panel was doing its work, they were already thinking in the back of their minds, how can we do that? How can we make it work? So they really had a can-do attitude with regard to all the recommendations. If there's any way we possibly can do it, then that's the approach they've taken. That hasn't been a hard sell. They have been at the table saying, let's try it this way, let's try it that way. So I want to thank everybody for their positive attitudes, and I think you'll see we're going to have a very positive outcome because of that. One of the very first recommendations that the panel had was that the KUB board adopt the vision. And this is a paraphrase of the vision. It's a narrative. It's in their proposal. It's also in our response to the proposal. But basically, the vision is to recognize the value of trees in our community, and it is our recommendation to the board that you adopt verbatim the vision of the panel recommendations. That will be done at a later date. We'll come back to you with our final recommendations in November. There is no official action recommended on today's agenda, but our recommendation will be that you adopt their vision verbatim. Another thing that they recommended is that the KUB board adopt the objectives that they have likewise adopted for their process. And these objectives, I think, serve them very, very well. Dawn Ford was a facilitator. At the beginning of the process, she said, you know, we really need to know why we're doing this and what we're trying to accomplish. And these are the objectives that the panel decided on and that guided their decisions through the process. And I think they are well served, and we likewise would recommend adoption at the November meeting of these objectives. But we want to also add the final objective at the bottom. As I said earlier, the panel was not asked to consider the costs of any of these objectives, any of the actions that they had, nor were they to look at operational complexities. We think it's appropriate to add an additional objective, that is to consider associated costs and financial impact on ratepayers. We think the ratepayers' ability to pay is something that we don't want to ever lose sight of as we make policy decisions here. This is a summary of how we're going to present to you today. There's a lot to go over. There is a report that will be provided at the conclusion of the meeting, but the report really has all the action items in it and the detail of our responses. But what we've attempted to do is summarize that report into a summary for today's presentation. Now I've asked Bill and Liz and Susan to share part of that presentation today. Then I will come back and talk to you about the final 3 bullets and to close it. We would encourage you to ask questions as we go through the discussion today. Obviously, at the end of the meeting, we'll take questions and comments from the public, but if you, as a board, would like to interrupt and ask questions, we encourage you to do so. So I'll pass it to Bill.